I was dodging bullets in Syria. She was moaning under my brother in our home. They said they loved me, but they were planning a life without me. I came back in a flag-draped uniform, thinking I was returning to the life I left behind. My wife was supposed to be at the airport, holding our daughter, tears in her eyes, running into my arms like in the movies. But she wasn't there. My brother was. He hugged me like nothing had changed, slapped my back, and made some joke about how much weight I lost. I laughed. God, I was so happy to see him. I didn't notice how tightly he gripped my shoulder or how he avoided eye contact when he asked, "So, heading home right now?" The house felt cold. Not physically, just wrong. Our daughter ran to me, squealing, "Daddy," like music. But my wife? She hesitated. Her hug felt hollow. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I chalked it up to shock. War messes with your head. Maybe it was just me. That's what I told myself. Until the signs started stacking up. A second toothbrush in the bathroom. A jacket that wasn't mine. A bottle of cologne I never used. I asked her. She laughed it off. "It's your brother's. He crashes here sometimes." Sure he does. Then came the late-night phone calls she'd take outside. The way she pulled away when I tried to hold her. The way our daughter slipped once and called him Daddy before she quickly corrected herself. The final blow came from an old friend. One beer too many, one sentence too honest. "I don't know how you're even speaking to them, man, after what they did." I asked what he meant. He went pale. And that's when the world shifted. If you've ever come home to something broken, not from war, but from betrayal, you'll understand. And if this story feels like your story too, give it a like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes silence needs a voice. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, and stared at the empty pillow next to me. That same pillow they had probably used while I was lying in the dust overseas, praying I'd get to see my daughter again. I felt like a fool, like I'd been living someone else's life, and I was the last to know. The next morning, I left the house before sunrise. I drove aimlessly for hours, ended up parked at a dead-end road near a field where we used to play as kids. I called my brother, told him I needed to talk. He agreed. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, but he showed up anyway. He didn't even try to lie. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said. "At first it was just, she was lonely, man. You were gone for so long." I punched him. I'd never hit my brother before. Not once, not even when we were kids. But my knuckles split open on his jaw and I didn't even care. He fell to the ground, blood trickling from his mouth. And still, I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to break him the way he broke my trust. He didn't fight back. Maybe he thought he deserved it. Maybe he did. He just sat there wiping his face, saying, "I'm sorry. I love her." That was the second hit. Not a punch this time, just the words, "I love her." Like it was some romantic tragedy. Like I was just collateral damage. When I got home, she was waiting. I didn't say a word. Just handed her the envelope with the paperwork I had drawn up the week before. Divorce papers. She started crying. Said it wasn't what it looked like. That she made a mistake. That she didn't want to lose our family. Too late. She wanted comfort. I wanted loyalty. And my daughter, she was in the living room, watching cartoons, blissfully unaware that everything was crumbling around her. I sat next to her, held her hand, swore to myself I wouldn't let her grow up thinking this was normal. Over the next few weeks, the fallout spread fast. Her family took her side, of course, said I was cold for not giving her a second chance, that I was overreacting. My own mother told me she was scared. She thought you'd die over there. I did die over there, just not in the way they expected. The man I was before the deployment, the husband, the brother, the son. He didn't come back from Syria. He stayed buried in the desert alongside the version of me that believed in unconditional love. What returned was someone quieter, colder, sharper. And for the first time in my life, I started seeing people for who they really were. I moved into a small rental on the edge of town. One bedroom, barely furnished, but clean, honest. No ghosts in the sheets, no betrayals in the walls. Just me, a mattress on the floor, and a daughter I now saw every other weekend. It wasn't much, but it was real. And real, after everything, was enough. At first, my daughter cried when I dropped her off. She didn't understand why she couldn't stay longer. She asked where Uncle Mason was. I didn't answer. I couldn't poison her world with the truth just yet. She deserved one safe place, even if it wasn't with me full time. But over time, she stopped asking for him. It's funny how kids can sense things, even when no one tells them. She'd cling to me harder when I picked her up, smile bigger, sleep better, and eventually, she stopped mentioning him at all. My brother tried to reach out a few times. Texts, missed calls, a birthday card, unsigned, but I recognized his handwriting. I never answered. I deleted his number, blocked him on everything. There was nothing left to say. He chose his side the moment he crossed that line. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence that followed, the empty holidays, the family dinners I wasn't invited to, the photos online, everyone smiling as if I never existed. And maybe to them, I didn't. Maybe I was just the soldier who went too far, took things too seriously, didn't forgive fast enough. But I learned something out there in the heat and grit of war. Sometimes survival means walking away from what hurts you, even if it once felt like home. One night, a year after everything blew up, I got a message from an unknown number. Just one sentence: "I think about you every day. I'm sorry." No name, no punctuation, but I knew it was her. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. Didn't delete it either. Just left it there, like a scar, a reminder. Not of the pain, but of the lesson I started writing again. Not to publish, not for anyone else, just for me. It was something I hadn't done since high school, when I'd scribble lyrics in the margins of my notebooks. At first, the words came out raw, broken, like pieces of me trying to glue themselves back together. But slowly, sentence by sentence, I found clarity. Not peace, just clarity. I wrote about the war, about home, about her, about him, about the look in my daughter's eyes when she realized I was different. I never mentioned names, didn't need to. The weight was in the silence between the lines. My therapist once told me that grief isn't always about death. Sometimes it's about accepting that the version of the life you were building no longer exists. And that was it. I was grieving a life I would never get back. A marriage that never really belonged to me. A brother who chose something else, someone else. People love to ask veterans what the hardest part of service is. They expect you to say the bullets, the blood, the chaos. But for me, it was coming home. It was seeing the same walls, same faces, same town. But knowing everything had changed. She eventually married him. I heard through someone at the grocery store. Small town, big mouths. They kept it quiet, maybe out of shame. Maybe because they knew what it looked like. But it didn't matter. I didn't go, I didn't send a message. I didn't even flinch. They had each other. And I had myself. One summer evening, a few years after the divorce, my daughter and I sat on a picnic blanket behind the rental. She was older now, sharper. We watched the stars come out, and she leaned against me with her head on my shoulder. "Dad?" she asked. "Did you and Mom love each other?" I didn't lie. "Yes," I said. "Once." She nodded. "Did she love Uncle Mason more?" That one hit harder than any roadside bomb ever could. I looked at her, really looked. Her mother's eyes, my jaw, but her heart, still whole. "I don't know," I said softly. But what matters is, I love you more than anything. That never changed. She didn't say anything for a while, just kept watching the stars. And then, barely above a whisper, she said, I'm glad I live with you now. That night, after she went to bed, I sat outside alone and looked up at the sky. Same stars, same world. But something in me had shifted. It wasn't about revenge anymore, or bitterness, or proving anything to anyone. It was about rebuilding, quietly, painfully, truthfully, until one day I could look in the mirror and not see what they broke, but what I rebuilt. And I wasn't there yet, but I was close. Months turned into years. I didn't mark anniversaries anymore. Not of the marriage, not of the divorce, not even of my return home. Dates stopped mattering when every day felt like a quiet reminder of what had been taken and what I chose not to take back. But that doesn't mean I forgot. The worst betrayals don't scream. They whisper. They show up in the smallest moments. When you hear a song that used to mean something, or smell a shampoo that doesn't belong in your bathroom anymore. When your daughter draws a picture of your family and there are only 2 stick figures instead of 3. One day, she found an old photo album buried in a closet box I never unpacked. She was maybe 11. Who's this? She asked, pointing at a picture of me and my brother in uniform, arms around each other, laughing. I froze. I wanted to lie, say it was someone else, but she had my eyes, she would know. So I told the truth, the abbreviated version. That's your Uncle Mason. We don't talk anymore. Why not? I met her gaze. I didn't owe her the gory details, but I owed her the principle. Because some people make choices that break things you can't fix, I said. And sometimes protecting yourself means not going back. She nodded slowly, didn't press. She was learning more from what I didn't say than anything I could have explained. A few weeks later, I got a call from a lawyer. Turns out, my brother had been in a car accident. Nothing fatal, just serious enough to rattle a few cages. He'd given the hospital my number as an emergency contact. I hadn't spoken to him in 6 years. I don't know why I went. Curiosity, maybe, or closure, or maybe deep down, some part of me still wanted to see the man I used to love like family. He looked smaller in the hospital bed. Not physically, just reduced. Like life had folded him in on himself. You came, he said, voice rough. I'm not staying, I replied. I deserved that. He reached for a cup of water with trembling hands. I didn't help him. I wanted to say I'm sorry, really sorry for everything. I stayed silent. I lost her too, he continued. Did you know that? She left me 2 years ago. Said she couldn't stand the guilt. Still, I didn't speak. She said she dreams about you, that you show up in her sleep and don't say anything. Just look at her. I almost laughed. That sounded about right. Then he asked, Do you ever think about me? And I answered honestly, only when I remind myself what loyalty isn't. I turned to leave, and he called after me. You were always the better man. I didn't turn around, didn't nod, didn't say a word, just kept walking down the hall, past the machines and quiet rooms and the weight of what was left unsaid. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest truth. The following weekend, my daughter and I went hiking, something we'd started doing regularly since she moved in full-time. She was taller now, stronger, asking smarter questions. She didn't cling to my hand like when she was little, but she stayed close, always within reach. At the top of the trail, we sat on a rock and looked out over the valley. She was quiet for a while, then said, I saw Mom last week. She didn't see me. She looked tired. I didn't know how to respond, so I waited. She looked at the bakery window like she was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. I nodded slowly. Sometimes People live with choices that never stop echoing. She tilted her head. Do you think she misses us? I think she misses who we used to be. Another pause. Then she said, Do you think we'll ever be a real family again? I turned to her, not with pity, but with respect. She was old enough now to hear this. We are a real family, I said, just not the one we started with. That night she drew something and left it on my desk. A picture of us on the mountaintop, just the two of us. No shadows in the background, no extra faces. Underneath it, in messy handwriting, she wrote, You're my home. I stared at that for a long time. Not crying, not broken, just still. I'd spent so long trying to rebuild what I lost that I almost didn't see what I had built instead. Not out of revenge, not out of spite, but out of resilience, out of honesty, out of love that stayed when everything else fell away. So if you've been betrayed, if someone you trusted turned your world upside down, let me tell you this. You don't need them to apologize. You don't need the people who hurt you to see your pain. You just need to survive long enough to build something stronger from the ashes. And when you do, you won't have to say a word. They'll feel it in the silence you leave behind. Years later, someone asked me if I ever forgave them. It was an innocent question, tossed casually at a work barbecue by a colleague who knew pieces of my story, but not the whole weight of it. I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I hadn't spoken it aloud before. No, I said, but I stopped needing to. Forgiveness is often sold as the final step in healing, but that's not always true. Sometimes healing means letting go of the anger without offering absolution. Sometimes it means accepting that there will never be a neat ending, no tidy bow on the wreckage. They never asked me what happened, not really. My parents stopped bringing up the divorce after I missed 2 Christmases in a row. My brother never contacted me again after that hospital visit. And my ex-wife? She moved away. I don't know where. I don't need to know. But I do know this. Wherever she is, she carries the same silence I do. The one that fills a room when betrayal walks in and trust walks out. The silence that lingers longer than shouting ever could. I didn't rebuild my life in grand gestures. I rebuilt it in morning routines, in school lunches packed with care, in bedtime stories read aloud even on the worst days, in quiet walks and louder laughs, in showing up every single time for the one person who never betrayed me. My daughter graduated high school last spring. I stood in the crowd, watching her walk across the stage in her cap and gown, clutching her diploma like it weighed more than it did. She spotted me right away, gave a tiny wave. Her smile didn't shake. It was steady, earned. Afterward, she hugged me so tightly I could feel her heartbeat in my ribs. "You proud of me?" she whispered. I smiled. "I've always been proud of you." We didn't mention her mom. She didn't ask if anyone else was watching. That night, we had dinner together, just the two of us. She raised her glass of soda and said, "To surviving and to starting over." I raised mine. "To never letting betrayal define us." She looked at me for a long second, then nodded. "And to not needing revenge to move on." The past didn't disappear. It never does. But it didn't control us anymore. We didn't need apologies. We didn't need closure. We had each other. And in the quiet, in the life we rebuilt, we were finally free. A few months after her graduation, we took a road trip. Just the two of us. No destination, no schedule. I let her pick the route, the music, the snacks. We drove through small towns and winding back roads, past diners with flickering neon signs and sleepy lakes that reflected the sky like glass. One afternoon, we pulled into a quiet town for gas. While I was at the pump, she wandered into a tiny bookstore next door. When I joined her, She was standing in front of a shelf labeled Memoirs, holding a book with a worn cover and a cracked spine. You ever think about writing it all down? She asked. Your story? I laughed. I have, but I don't think anyone would believe it. She looked at me then, not like a child, but like an equal. That's the thing about the truth, she said. It doesn't need to be believed to be real. I took the book from her hands and flipped it open. Inside, someone had underlined a single sentence. Sometimes survival is less about fighting and more about refusing to disappear. I bought the book. Didn't even look at the title. Just felt like something I was supposed to carry with me. That night, in a motel room with squeaky floors and paper-thin walls, I opened my laptop. I started writing. Really writing. Not just for myself this time, but for anyone who ever wondered if betrayal had to be the end of their story. I wrote about silence, about strength, about the sharp kind of love that carves you open, and the softer kind that helps you heal. I wrote about a man who came home in pieces and a girl who helped him find the ones worth keeping. And then I closed the laptop, breathed deep, and finally, after all these years, let the past settle where it belonged, behind me. Now, on quiet mornings when I wake up to birdsong instead of bombs, to coffee brewing instead of alarms screaming, I look around the home we built. Simple, warm, honest, and realize something I never thought I'd feel again. Peace. It didn't come from forgetting. It didn't come from forgiving. It came from choosing myself, from choosing her, from saying no more when everyone else expected me to stay silent. So, no, this isn't a story about revenge. It's not even a story about loss. It's about reclamation. Taking back your name, your boundaries, your dignity, and building a new life from the rubble of the old, brick by brick, breath by breath, until one day you look around and realize that you didn't just survive the betrayal, you transcended it. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear echoes of the past. Not voices, not screams or apologies, just moments. The shuffle of combat boots across concrete. The creak of the front door that used to open to a life I thought was mine. The faint hum of my ex-wife's laugh from a memory I can't quite place. It's all there, somewhere, buried beneath the layers of who I've become. But those echoes don't hurt anymore. They remind me that I lived through something that didn't kill me, but could have. They remind me that silence, when used right, can be a kind of armor. Not the kind that shuts the world out, but the kind that lets in only what matters. And in that silence, I've built something unshakable. I've built mornings that begin with my daughter's voice, not accusations. I've built holidays that don't revolve around pretending everything's okay. I've built a space where love means loyalty, not convenience, where trust isn't a currency, but a gift freely given. There were times I thought I'd never get here. When the betrayal was fresh, I wanted destruction. I imagined public confrontations, dramatic reveals, even courtroom showdowns. I wanted the world to see what they did. I wanted them to suffer as I had. But that was the trap. Betrayal doesn't end when you make them pay. It ends when you stop needing them to feel what you felt. When you stop keeping score. When you realize that peace costs more than revenge. But it lasts longer. My daughter's in college now. She calls every few days. We talk about classes, life, her dreams. She asks about mine too. And for the first time in years, I have some. I've started speaking to veterans groups, telling my story. Not for pity, but for power. Because someone out there right now is sitting in a dark apartment, staring at a wall, wondering if the betrayal they just discovered is survivable. And I want them to know it is. Not easy, not fast, not clean, but survivable. One night after a talk, a young guy, maybe mid-20s, came up to me. He didn't say much, just looked me in the eye and said, "I thought I was crazy until you said it out loud." I nodded. That's all it takes sometimes. Someone saying it out loud. And now, maybe that someone is me. I used to believe that betrayal was the worst thing a person could experience, that the moment someone breaks your trust, everything after is just damage control. But that's not the full truth. The real pain isn't in the act, it's in what it steals from you afterward. The second guessing, the shame, the feeling that you were stupid for not seeing it, weak for caring too much, or broken for not walking away sooner. But I wasn't stupid, or weak, or broken. I was loyal, and they weren't. There's a quiet dignity in surviving something like that without letting it turn you into someone you're not. I didn't burn their house down. I didn't ruin their names. I didn't scream into the void. I just rebuilt, silently, brick by painful brick. And now, years later, when I tuck myself into a life that is mine, fully, freely mine, I feel something they may never understand. Wholeness, not perfection, not forgetting, but a kind of stillness that can't be faked. I look at the man I've become, the father, the mentor, the writer, and I wouldn't trade him for the naive soldier who once thought love meant sacrifice at any cost. Because love isn't meant to cost everything. Not your peace, not your worth, not your soul. And if someone ever asks me what saved me, I'll say it wasn't therapy or time or revenge. It was her, my daughter. She reminded me what loyalty looks like when it's real. Quiet, consistent, and never conditional. And now I'll ask you, have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to realize they never deserved a single piece of you? What did you do next?